My wife called me that Friday morning asking in a panic for me to come home. So I left the family business that my father had left for me and my brother to run home because I felt something was up. Beth Tate was a stay-at-home mother that had never worked a day in our married life. She would never bother me at work unless it was something important. So, I knew it was serious. I was wondering if something had happened to one of our teenage daughters at school. I was just hoping it was not as serious as she had made it sound. Both our daughters were very athletic, so I was wondering if it might be a sports injury. My daughters were my life. Both were developing into becoming very beautiful women, just like their mother. We were the biggest electrical company in this part of the state. I handled the commercial and my brother did the residential. Since we had taken over, we had more than tripled our volume each year for the last 6 years. My mother was very proud of both her sons for keeping her husband's lifelong dream alive. Last year, the company had made $5 million net after all the taxes were paid for the first time in its over 50-year history. In the 9 years since our father's death, we had made it into a very successful business. I estimated the current value of our father's business to be worth about $20 million. Since John was the oldest, he was made the president by our mother after our father's death. She was still the major shareholder and controlled 52%. My brother and I each owned 24%. My dad had set it up that way to make sure our mother had security for the rest of her natural life. When our father died, my mother insisted that I assume the responsibility of looking after her personal investments using her trusted investment broker. I had gone from the conservative approach to the aggressive. It had turned out very well for her. I came home to find the furniture and household movers there packing up the stuff my wife wanted taken out of our house. Beth was standing at the side of the road beside her recently obtained 2020 model car, which I had bought for her, for cash. Beth was leaving me for good, and our daughters had already been relocated to their new living location without my knowledge or permission. She had kept them out of school today so that they could all make the move together, thus giving them the avoidance from the drama of seeing us break up. I realized very quickly she had done it this way deliberately, so I could not talk to our 2 daughters about the situation. "I'm sorry, James, but I've fallen out of love with you, and I'm in love with someone else," she said as she handed me the divorce petition papers. "You don't need to know who he is, because it really doesn't matter since I have already filed for divorce." I knew there was no easy way for me to do this, so my lover and I decided that it was best for all concerned to make our last contact as husband and wife brief as possible. With that said, she got into her car and drove off. As she drove away, I witnessed the end of our 17-year-old marriage. No real explanation. It was over, and that was it. She had done it so coldly that I didn't even have a chance to find out what my daughter's view was on the whole situation. The first thing that crossed my mind was that she had developed a relationship with someone she had met online. But then the girls would have told me if their mother was spending too much time chatting via the internet. That would have required a bit of distance, and since it was not yet noon, that was ruled out. Wherever she was moving to, it was local. I stood there for a second as 2 men moved another piece of our daughter's furniture out of the house. Then I realized that they would have to know where they were delivering the furniture to. I asked the driver, and he gladly showed me the delivery address. I was in total shock because it was one that I knew all too well. I pulled out 3 20s out of my wallet and told him to put it towards a nice dinner with his wife. I thanked him and asked him to lock up the doors when they were done. I drove back towards our family business, making one stop on the way to verify that what he had shown me was true. What I saw from making that honest stop at the side of the road tore my life as I knew apart for good. Not only was it devastating that she had walked out on me, it was made worse because of who she was doing it for. Beth was the girl that always seemed to tag along with her brother and me wherever we went. Until her early teens, the 3 of us were inseparable. Her brother was still a good friend, but he was now a lifer in the Marines. He had taken the morals, principles, and standards he had been raised with in his walk of life and applied them to a career that supported them. I was proud of my brother-in-law and had a deep respect for him. The 3 of us started developing different interests in life as we went through the rest of our teens and had grown apart because of the normal things that happen in life. With my father's business booming, most of my spare time was spent helping out in his growing business. At times I would be receiving stock for the next job he had to complete. I had asked my father why he hadn't used his own name when he started the family business. He replied, "Tate and Sons or variations of it have been used too much and most don't last. I want this business to go on long after I am gone. Parish is your mother's maiden name and give spirituality to it." My older brother John, who was 3 years older than me, would take me with him when he was delivering stuff needed at various job sites. Because of his age, he got a wage, I didn't, but I used that time to learn as much as I could. When I finished the 10th grade, I went into an apprenticeship program to earn my electrical license and at the same time continued my education online. I graduated the 12th grade before I finished my apprenticeship and started getting a university degree in business management. It was using that skill and basic knowledge as I was learning it that helped my father to expand and grow his business. John, on the other hand, worked his way up the ladder the hard way, learning every aspect of the family business by working and learning the best way of doing things with those he worked with. He also picked up quite a few of their bad habits along the way. What separated my brother and I was that I started bidding and winning small commercial contracts that we brought in under budget and at saving for our customers. It was an avenue that my father and brother knew very little about. The kind of word of mouth created by our approach to it gave us more growth than we could have wished for. Our father always said I was the brain of the company. John was the brawn, and it took the two to make our business successful. I was 20 years old living on my own when my brother called me one night because he was too damn drunk to drive home. He was at a wild private party in the middle of nowhere and didn't want to get busted by the cops, so I had gone out to save his worthless bum once again. After loading his drunk body into the back seat of the car I driving, a voice behind me said, "James, can I get a ride home with you? My date is passed out somewhere, and if I don't get home my dad will kill me." Beth's father was a diehard, old Christian conservative with a liberal point of view, as long as it did not conflict with his belief or his interpretation of what the Bible said. I turned to look at the voice, discovering the new Beth. At 17, she had turned into a very beautiful young lady. Her bright blue eyes were mesmerizing. She had a smile that was addictive, and she seemed relieved to have found someone she felt safe with. She had an hourglass figure that would attract men like bees would be to honey. Her long blonde hair and the huge mass of her globes got your attention fast. Beth had a rack that would make most females jealous. I could have just stood there and looked at her all night. Her parents were very protective of her, and I knew she would be in trouble if her father had known where she was, so I agreed to give her a ride home. Her father was waiting for her when she got home. I stopped at the edge of the road to hide the snoring lug, sleeping it off in the back. I went around to the passenger side and helped her out, then walked her to her front door. Her father, already worked up being concerned about his daughter being out so late, opened the door ready to tell her date off for bringing her home past curfew to discover it was me. "Damn it, Beth, you should have told me your date was James the first, would not have worried." A week later, she came looking for me at my father's shop at the end of the workday. I was preparing the truck for the next day. Beth had come to ask me to take her to her senior prom, which was still 2 months away. I said I would think about and offered to drive her home. I ended taking her out for supper after stopping off at her parents' place to make sure it was okay with him because it was a school night. It took her most of the night to convince me that she was interested in me. Another 2 weeks before I started taking her seriously. The night of her prom, we agreed to become exclusive. That was how it had all started. And now the end of marriage had come. About 20 minutes later, I pulled into my parking spot at our head office. A few minutes later, I walked to John Tate's office as a very angry but determined man, only to find the door was shut, so I asked his receptionist if my older brother was in. She said he was in there by himself talking to some female on the phone, but the door was locked. He wanted privacy because it was of a serious personal nature. "Mary," I said, "could you come into my brother's office with me, please? I need you to be a witness to what I have to say." Mary took one look at my face and knew whatever I was going to say was very important because the anger in me was written all over it, and said, "Of course." As soon as she was beside me, I shocked her by kicking the door open, breaking the door open, and barged in. John looked up in surprise as we walked in and quickly ended his conversation without saying goodbye. He turned his cell phone off. For the first time in a long time, I had his total attention. I said in pure rage, "You need to get this business appraised and find a way to buy my shares out. You have got as long as my divorce takes." "John, do you have the brains to comprehend that?" Mary's mouth dropped open a mile wide. She had never heard me raise my voice in my life. "What the hell is this all about?" John asked. "The movers gave me the address that they're delivering the items that Beth wanted moved," I said. "I witnessed my daughters coming out of their new residence to talk to her just as she pulled in." John just stood there not saying a word, trying to figure out how to handle the situation with me. I knew that they hadn't wanted me to know. "It wasn't intentional," John said without any remorse while looking at me coldly. "She's just staying with me till she finds a place to live." "Sorry. We both know that is a lie because she said to me that she was moving in with the man she had fallen in love with." "As far as I was concerned," I said, "she said I didn't need to know his name because it was none of my business anymore what she did with her life because she had just handed me the divorce petition." It was sad to see my older brother's face turn completely white. I could tell the a-hole was tongue-tied. I knew he was basically a coward who had never been able to face the truth. Mary's face went white. She knew that John Tate would screw anything that wore a skirt but never expected he would stoop to stealing his brother's wife. Rumor had it that he'd been treated more than once for catching a social disease. "How long have the two of you been lovers?" I asked. "On those afternoons when I had to cover for you, was it so you could go to my home and screw her like you do every other woman you get your paws on? I guess I will have to get myself tested for a sexually transmitted disease because I have seen some of the hookers you have slept with." John's face went white as he quietly said, "I don't think that work is the time or place for us to discuss this." "Screw you. There will never be the right time for something like this, John," I said in pure anger. "Best you get your bum over to the bank and begin talking to the Mangers or put the business up for sale. We are done as business partners and as brothers as far as I am concerned. James, there gotta be another option. We can't afford to lose you," John said. "We will have to talk this out when you have calmed down." I picked up the phone on his desk in pure anger and dialed our mother while turning the speaker on so that everyone could hear both sides of the conversation. Thankfully, she was not out working with one of her charities. She answered right away. "Mom, I'm afraid I got some bad news for you," I said in almost a rage. "Today is my last day. I am resigning from the family company effective immediately. I told John earlier today that he had to find a way to buy out the shares that I own as soon as possible." "What?" Mom said in shock. "You love that business and always have. You're the rock that has made it what it is today. It's your vision for its future that drives you. What has happened to make you come to this decision?" "I think you should have your other son answer that when you find him because he's not in his office right now. He might be at his home because his secret lover is finally moving into his house today. I understand they're getting married as soon as her divorce is done," I said. "He's most likely with her showing his loving support. I'm sure you will be happy to see him finally settling down with a woman who already has children because it appears that he has finally started growing up," I said, starting to calm down. "Now I suggest you drive over to his place so you can proudly introduce yourself to the beautiful lady he was bragging about for months and introduce yourself as her future mother-in-law." I hung up the phone. John's face was in a rage. He couldn't say anything because at our family dinners at Mom's, he'd been bragging about the woman he was in love with for months. I knew by his look that if we were anywhere but here, he would be trying to kick the shit out of me. "Mary, could you follow me to my office and make sure that I don't take anything with me when I leave that may belong to the company? I don't want to give anyone the chance to claim I was fired because I am nothing but a thief." I said, "I will need a signed statement that I have turned over all the keys in my possession to you, and that I have left with only what we agreed is not company property." John was getting angrier by the moment because I was out and out saying to all the staff that I expected the absolutely the worst from him. Before leaving his office, I said, "Should I walk out backward, so you won't have the chance to stab me in the back again?" "John, with what Beth and you have done, it would have been better if you had have got one of Dad's guns and just shot me." We walked back to my office where my receptionist was working and I said, "Joe, and could you please come in and witness what is about to take place? I think Mary will appreciate having a witness to what we're doing." "James, what's going on?" Joan asked. "I've quit because James has stolen my wife and my children from me," I said. "I got called home to be served with divorce papers. The movers who were moving what Beth wanted out of the house gave me the address they were delivering it to, and to my surprise, it was my brothers. Both our long-term executive assistants were in total shock. These wonderful ladies had been both our rocks for years. They both knew I loved and respected them dearly. "Let's list everything James takes," Mary said, "along with what keys he gives us. We will type it all up and all witness it. We will make 5 copies of it. Joanne and I will each take a copy of it home for safekeeping so that if the ones here disappear, we can later verify what transpired here today." That simple statement showed me just how much they trusted the president of the company. It made me wonder what else my older brother was hiding. It took us about an hour to get it done. I called security to escort me out and verify what I was taking out with me. I watched as both of the ladies put the extra copies in the purse. My brother had rushed out without saying goodbye, hoping to find a way to avoid the drama that most likely was going on at his house. I would learn later that he got home too late. Everyone saw the top 2 executive assistants escorting me out with our security personnel with tears in their eyes. At the front door before leaving, I kissed both the ladies on the cheek and thanked them for their years of support. I stepped out of the door and took the single box out of the security officer's hand. As soon as I left, everyone wanted to know what was going on. The ladies explained what they knew. After opening the trunk, I threw the box in and closed it. On the way through town, I stopped at a real estate office and listed the house. I gave the representative my wife's cell phone number and told her she would need her signature. I told her that I would leave it up to my soon-to-be ex to decide on the list price. Once I got home, I discovered that the only items besides their personal belongings taken had been the bedroom's furniture of our daughters. As soon as I did that, I shut off my cell phone. I pulled out the divorce papers and read them. The grounds were emotional and mental cruelty and other crap. She was asking for primary custody of our daughters Bijou and Brie. I was being offered supervised visitation once a month for only 1 hour. Beth thought I was over strict with our daughter because I would not allow them as girls aged 13 and 15 to date with boys of their age without chaperones. That was one of her bullshit reasons for the divorce. She felt I was too old-fashioned for the world we lived in. My view of morals, principle, and standards were too restrictive for our society today. When we had argued about it, I had told her I did not want our 2 daughters ruining their lives by getting knocked up. In school, girls in that condition, in the eyes of their peers, were proudly proclaiming they were nothing but easy bitches. Most teenage girls that were in the condition when I was growing up had never amounted to much. I wanted the best for my children. As a result, Beth thought my view of family structure was hurting their personal development. I knew that she felt I was treating our daughter the same way her father had her at that age, and she had always tried to revolt against him when she was growing up. Beth was going for my throat because of our different views on how our daughters should be raised. I went to the liquor cabinet and poured myself a stiff one. I flipped the channels trying to find something to occupy my mind, but could not find anything but outdated reruns in our modern world. Star Wars, Sex and the City, or Law and Order did not fit my taste buds at all. I must have passed out drunk because I woke up with a hangover, laying on the living room sofa still dressed in my business suit. I went upstairs undressed, showered, and shaved to get ready for the day. After making myself breakfast, I went outside and did my usual Saturday morning chores. It was around 1 o'clock in the afternoon when I turned my cell phone back on. I had text messages from my mother, my brother, my wife, and my 2 daughters, all trying to reach me out of their own selfish concern. I believed that my daughters were in on what was going on and had agreed to go with their mother. The only one I believed was from my mother. In my frame of mind at the time, the rest didn't mean shit. I had just finished listening to them and dropping all the messages left on the answering service, asking me to contact them so we could start resolving things. My wife in her message had said, I didn't have to do what I was doing, that we could come to some sort of agreement once I had thought about it and settled down. That was when the real estate lady called me. Mr. Tate, your wife finally showed up this morning, but she was not a happy person, Miss Waterston said. She was shocked to find you're letting everything in the house go with it. I showed her comps of other houses in the area, and she agreed to add $20,000 because of the value of the furniture. Thank you for providing me that information, I said. I'd like it sold as soon as possible because it holds too many memories. Just so you know, she broke down because she did not expect you to do what you're doing, she said. I asked her, what did you expect him to do? You left him for his piece of shit brother. Selling the house, I expected, your wife said, but demanding to be bought out from the family company, no. I said to her, what choice did you leave him? In your eyes, was he supposed to be happy that he is his brother's cuck and now his sissy bitch for the rest of your natural lives? I never saw it as that. I just wanted away from them for good, I said. In the divorce petition, she's trying to take the kids completely away from me. Apparently neither did she by the look on her face. I thought she was going to throw up. She said she had never seen that. I told her that she might be able to bullshit a lot of people, but I know how bitches like you think. Miss Waterston said, I made an appointment with my sister. She's a damn good divorce lawyer, for you for Monday. I will text you her name and office address when I get off the phone. I thanked her for her kindness and then hung up the phone. I was just refreshing my coffee cup when I saw my older sister's car pull into the driveway. So, I finished making my coffee. With it in hand, I went to the front door to let her in. Mom must have called her after going over to my brother's house. It was an 8-hour drive from their place to here. It must be pretty important, I said, for you to drive halfway across the state. Connie looked at me and said, I can't believe what the 2 of them have done. Mom was completely devastated when she arrived at John's place to discover Beth and your daughters there setting up house. What are they thinking? You think you're in shock? You should see it from my side, I said with eyes that were tearing up. I didn't have a clue. Do you know how long it had been going on? From what Mom told me after talking to Beth yesterday before John got home, my sister said. About 2 years. Shit, how could I have been so blind? I said. Before we talk further, you should see why she says she wants the divorce by reading the paperwork. I just made a fresh pot. I will get you one, then we can talk. Connie read it all through. It was quite detailed as minor arguments were expanded to make them big. Everything was exaggerated to the extreme. Beth wants you out of your own daughter's lives, Connie noted. Most of what she claims is bullshit. We both know it. I'm here because Mom does not want you leaving the family business. So, Mother wants me to accept being my brother's cuck and accept my new position as his sissy bitch until my dying day, I said. Do I have it right? I was thanking the real estate lady for pointing that out to me because Connie was now in total shock. I knew by the look on her face that she understood the significance of what I was saying because it showed beyond a doubt just how little my big brother thought of me. Oh my God, Connie swore. I chuckled because my big sister had never used a foul word in her life. As a good Christian, she would say bananas in anger instead of the four-letter word. How am I going to explain this to our mother? Connie asked. With her Christian views, she would never see what they have really done. The stigma they are putting on you is revolting. The adultery, the breakup of your marriage, and the way they are trying to take away your kids she can see, but not that. That's the reason I'm leaving the company, I said. No matter what deal is made, I would always feel he was laughing in my face because he had so easily turned my wife and children against me. The only reason he's taking what was mine is that he didn't have the balls like a man to build a personal family life for himself. So, he took mine to keep himself in good standing with our mom. Your husband makes business deals, perhaps it would be best that you have him find someone to buy the company. Our brother has left you no choice. You have to write him out of your life, Connie said. He knew what he was doing to you, and that makes it deliberate. Our brother is an a-hole, and that is saying it as politely as I can. Connie called her husband and I listened, as she explained the whole situation. When she got off the phone, she said, he will have a team coming in to appraise it for market value Monday morning. I now just have to go over and convince our mother it's the best solution for us all. I went into my home office and pulled out the last 5 years of financial records and set the file in front of her. That's the last 5-year corporation statements and tax returns. Your husband will need them, I said. What about Bijou and Bree? Connie asked. That boils down to what Judge Donald McDonald believes. I would have gotten Dale Britton, but he's tied up with that big right-to-life case right now and is not taking on any new cases. Her lawyer is painting a pretty ugly picture. Connie and I talked for a few more minutes before she left to have a long talk with our mother. I didn't sleep well that night because I was used to having my wife beside me. It was then I decided that after I saw the lawyer, I would leave town for a few days. I had to separate myself from the situation to be able to look at it rationally. Connie called me after she and Mom had a long chat with the pastor after the Sunday service. The pastor said the one who has been harmed the most may never get over it. What they did to him was despicable but quite normal in today's society because love and decency had lost its moral value. To many, they have just become tools that they can use to manipulate and control others. Love is just a four-letter word unless one's long-term conduct proves what it means. My mother was apparently surprised when the pastor said your son James is not the first to have his life destroyed by a family that claims to love them and won't be the last. Mom agrees to put the whole business up for sale, Connie explained. Not because of what John did, but because she knows without you there, John would run it into the ground. She wants to know who she should put in your position. Does she understand that I have been given no choice but to consider my brother dead in my eyes? I asked. Yes, and why? Connie said. I had to explain to Mom what a cuck meant in society's eyes and what that label applied about the person. Mom has sworn that if she ever sees Beth again, she is going to kill her. Tell Mom she has to put Carl Robertson in as president. He was my second and knows everything I do. If she doesn't, John could override him and would. It's the commercial end that makes us the big money and always will. For us to get the best price for the company, it has to be done this way. Connie, she has to do it in person and demote John to vice president and make it public by placing an announcement of the changes in the paper. Should we warn John in advance? Connie asked. No, and if Mom feels she can't do it, I said, you will have to have her appoint you as CEO for a 1-year term, or until the company is sold. You have to understand why I have to stay out of it. I can't afford to be involved because it would be used against me in divorce court to further Beth's claims. Connie said she was going to check with her husband to verify that my reasoning was sound. She also said she had faxed him all the corporate information last night. About 2 hours later, Connie texted, I'm the new CEO. I will be doing as you suggested tomorrow morning. I was having a brunch around 2. I had made pan fries with eggs and bacon when Beth called me. This time I answered. Can we talk? Beth asked. We just did. If your lover or you contact me again, I will lay charges of harassment, I said. Anything left to be done will be worked out in court. We have to talk about Bijou and Bree, Beth said, and start working things out. Now that you have started calming down, there's no reason for you to leave the family business. Oh, we will sort this out on my terms, not yours, I said coldly. I will be going to court to get court-ordered paternity tests done to prove whether they are my brother's or mine. I think we all have the right to know just what the truth is, and know I will never return to anything that involves him. Beth gasped in shock and said, "They are yours, and you know they are. I believed I had a loving wife until I came home on Friday, didn't I? And look how wrong I was about that," I said. "So, based on these new truths I am now learning to live with, I must assume there is likely a very good possibility that I'm really not a father either. After all, we both know John could have been screwing you for years and getting a kick out of it because I was the big sucker paying for it. After all, John is willing to screw any willing and eager bitch if it doesn't cost him anything." Beth started bawling, but I had no pity. I just hung up the phone. Out of a hunch, I called my former executive assistant Joanne. Her husband had gone through his own nightmare of a divorce from his first wife years ago. "Sorry to bother you," I said, "but I could really use your husband's guidance about what I'm about to face." "Let me talk to David," she said. "So, hang on for a second." I did, and when she came back, she said, "David is on his way." About half an hour later, David showed up. I let him read the divorce petition, then I walked him through everything that had happened since Friday. "Let's be clear about this," David said. "You do not have any idea when the affair started other than what you have heard via a third party." "That's true, and that was heard from a third party," I said, "who had heard it directly from someone who had talked to Beth directly. Then in the court's eyes you will be justified because of the family situation in requesting that it be proven that they are yours before going forward with anything else," David said. "Just the way you found out who her lover is implying a deliberate long-term deception on their part against you. Judge Donald McDonald will require biological proof before making any rulings. The judge is a sticker on actual facts, not one's personal belief or presentation of their facts." "Is the judge that strict?" I asked. "Yes, it took me 6 months to get my divorce worked out, but I can honestly say that when it was all over none of us were happy with how he resolved it," David explained, "because he put the need of our children first. To be honest, now I have to say that his final ruling was right." I offered David a stiff one, and we were sitting there chatting about his relationship with Joe, and when we heard a truck pulling into my driveway, I stood up and looked out the living room window to see that it was my brother John. "Son of a bitch that a whole dares to show up here after what he has done to me," I said. "I wish I had one of my dad's 22s in the house." David said, "Sit down, I will go talk to him, and if he won't leave, I will show him my badge. I don't think he wants to deal with the Cape Girardeau police." He opened up the front door and pulled the window down on the screen door so I could hear their conversation before stepping out. After slamming his truck door in anger, John yelled, "Where the hell is my stupid brother?" I told him that we could sit down and work it out, but the a-hole would not listen, but now he is going to have to because I got a few things I need to straighten out with him right now. If he won't listen, I will shove my fist down his throat until he does. "No," said David. "You need to go home and cool down before you do something you will later regret." "Screw you, a-hole. Get the hell out of my way." I left Beth in tears because he is questioning the paternity of his daughters, John said. "He needs to be straightened out on this, and I'm the a-hole that's going to do it." "So, when did the affair start?" David asked. "About 5 years ago, if it's any of your business," John replied. "Interesting, because Beth told your mother yesterday at your house. It was 2 years ago," David said as he pulled out his badge to show it. "I have to ask myself what is the truth, because it is apparent that both of you, by your own statements, are making the other appear to be nothing but a liar." I could see John's face going white as David went on. "So after making James an unknowing cuck by your lovers and your own conduct, your brother James was supposed to accept it and continue on as if nothing had happened. Do I have Beth's and your thinking right? Was it your plans to gradually break him and turn him into your personal submissive sissy bitch? What gives you the right to believe your little brother is supposed to do what he is told to by you?" John was stunned. He didn't know what to say. It showed me that neither one of them had sat down with each other to really figure this whole situation out. David went on to say, "I wonder what the judge will say when I show him the recorded video of our conversation. I suggest you get back in the truck and prepare Beth for the paternity test that will come," David said. "It has to, because we can now confirm that what you both explained about your relationship has no credibility, and whatever you explain about it will be just more lies designed to try to defuse the situation." I watched my brother walk back to the truck with the realization that things were turning out a lot different than they had planned. David waited till he drove away before he walked back into the house. "What's your lawyer's name?" he asked. "I will contact her on Monday and send her a copy of this cam recording." I opened my text messages, and he copied the lady's name and phone number for his information. "Why did you bring your police cam?" I asked. "It's common practice in all domestic situations," David explained. "When Joanne told me why you wanted to talk to me, I knew just by the short time that had expired that anything could happen, so I came prepared." Let Joanne know that I am going to go out of town after I see the lawyer, I said. I think it's best that I stay out of the area for a while because of what is coming down tomorrow. Is it anything the cops might be called about? David asked. Our older sister has been appointed the CEO of the family company this morning. Tomorrow she will be appointing Carl Robertson as president, I disclosed. He was my second in command to me. Joanne has worked as close to him as I have, and she will likely become his executive assistant. The current president, my brother, will be demoted to vice president. This is happening why? David asked. My mother does not want my brother destroying what she knows my father and I have built, I said, before she finds a buyer for it. Then I agree with your reasoning, David said. If I were you, I would be packed to go so you could leave right after the lawyer's appointment. John will be on a rampage because he will see it as all you're doing. From what I have learned about your brother, he is hot-headed and reacts without thinking. Idiots like that are capable of doing anything. After David left, I cleaned up the kitchen, then hit Ace Hardware and purchased new lock set for all the doors. It took about 2 hours to get that done. I was about to start changing the code system on the house security system when my cell phone went off. I looked at the caller's information and prepared myself. It was Beth's father. What's going on, James? He asked. My granddaughters have been calling me from a phone number I don't know because Beth has confiscated their cell phones, and your phone is never on. Did you ask Beth why? I asked. I've tried to, but all she will say it's a personal matter, and that she will explain it all to us later, he said. Katie and I have had enough. We want some answers now. Beth moved out on Friday, I said. She called me home from work just as the movers were finishing and served me the divorce papers. She said she had fallen in love with another man and that his name did not matter. Are you serious, James? My father-in-law asked quietly. Afraid so. The movers provided me with her new address because your daughter could not be honest to me, I explained. The man she moved in with is my older brother. From what the family has been told by them, their relationship has been going on from 2 to 5 years, depending on which one of them you talk to. My gut is telling me it's been going on a lot longer than that. Beth does not want me to have any contact with Bijou and Bree. She, in her divorce petition, is requesting that I only be allowed a 1-hour-a-month supervised visit with them. Why would she want to do that? He asked. You've been one of the best fathers I have ever seen. I think that she does not believe that I am the biological father of her children, I said. So, my lawyer, when we head to court, will be asking for DNA tests to be done to confirm just what the truth is. Just so you know, I am no longer associated with the family business in any way. It sounds like she already has an idea who their real father might be, Beth's father said. If she is right, we can assume she has been lying to us all her whole life. What should I tell my granddaughters when they call again? What they and I have not been getting from their mother for a long time, I said. The truth. As soon as we said our goodbyes to each other, I got back to work resetting all of the codes. I decided to go out for a bite to eat. So, I went to Golden Corral. It was just after 11 a.m. when I had gotten out of the lawyer's office. She, like me, agreed it was a frigging mess. David had sent her the video file, which she thought was dynamite because it would cause the judge to question the plaintiff's own credibility. My lawyer believed that with their own stupidity, they had put me in the driver's seat going forward. I had just left the bank after canceling all debit and credit cards in my wife's name. She had also been removed from all bank accounts. My next stop was the real estate office to give her the access code and the new key to the house. With that done, I hit the road south. I was about an hour on the road when Joanne called. Just making sure you're on the road, Joanne said. Connie just walked in and is being directed to Carl Robertson's office. I left about an hour ago, after dropping off the keys to the house with the listing broker, I said, heading south with no particular place to go. We'll call you afterward to let you know when it goes down, Joanne said. Text me a warning to give me a chance to pull over, I said before saying goodbye. I drove on for a few until I found the next rest stop. Finally, away from having it right in front of me, I let it all come out. Thankfully, being the middle of the day, no one else pulled in. I don't know how long I had been at the rest stop before I got out, so I could stretch my legs and walk around the place. I had just got back to my car when a police cruiser pulled in. He pulled up beside me and got out. I was sitting on the other side of the highway watching for speeders when you pulled in, the officer said. After 2 hours, I was a bit concerned, so I thought I would come over and just check that there were no real problems. To be honest, I have just been through 4 long days of an emotional roller coaster, I said. That decided to come out, so I thought it was best not to drive. Start of an unexpected divorce, he said with a smile. Yep, how did you know that? I asked. The road south going nowhere seems to come to every man's mind, he said with a smile. He opened up his trunk and pulled 2 cold bottles of Coke out of a cooler and offered me one. We were still chatting when the text message came in. "Do you need privacy?" he asked as we stood there. "Nope, but you might enjoy hearing the call that's coming because I'm about to find out what happened with my wife's lover's employment situation," I said. The text was to give me time to find a spot to pull off. As soon as the call came through, I answered it and threw the speaker on. "How did it go, Joanne?" "Carl Robertson accepted the president position temporarily after he learned it was you that had suggested him," Joanne said. Together, Connie and he went into John's office and informed him of his removal. John didn't take it well and refused the vice president's position. Carl then said with a smile, "I guess, then you have decided to quit. Let me call security to escort you out." John kept swearing up and down while cursing about you because he felt this was all you're doing. "So, my brother has lost his job and joined the unemployed like me," I said. "Oh, for John, that has got to hurt his pride a lot." "Off the record, James, from the tidbits I've heard, I think that was Connie and your mother's plan all along," Joanne said. "Gotta go. Expect a phone call from Connie shortly." The police officer saw a big smile come across my face as I started to explain. "My wife of 17 years left me for my brother last Friday. I resigned as vice president from the family privately owned corporation that same day and demanded they find a way to buy my shares out. They never saw this coming." I had just finished explaining the whole mess when Connie called, so I threw the speaker on. "Hey, when can you get your bum back here?" Connie asked. "Why? From what I have heard, you got everything under control," I said. "You don't need me. Carl is the right man for the job." "Smartass, you know nothing," she said. "My husband spent the whole weekend lining up the financing so you could buy your brother's shares. Our mother wants him out. He will be using a third-party business loan to achieve it. So, get your butt back here so Carl can assume the vice president position he accepted only if you came back as the president. Sis, I will meet you all at Mother's place around 6 tonight," I said. "Is that soon enough? Tell Joanne to order new office furniture for my new office and for the office that goes with the new position she will hold as my executive assistant. Tell to clean the rooms out and have them freshly painted. Let her decide the colors as she knows me that well. I will give her a 10% raise when I see her in the morning." With that said, we said our goodbyes. I had a big smile on my face. "What's the name of your company?" the officer asked. "Parish Electrical," I said. "We're in about a third of the state and always expanding. Your logo is no job is too big or too small." He said. "That it is. That was my dad's favorite saying, so we adopted it as our motto years ago," I said, "and I personally still feel that way." We talked for a few minutes more, then he handed me his business card, and before we parted, he told where the next turnoff was so I could reverse my direction. He followed me out. I was thankful for the friendship I had been shown by the police officer that day, and when I found the turnoff point, I took it as he drove on. When I got back to town, I took a look at his card. It gave the division its location and his cell phone number. I took the card and put it in my wallet for safekeeping. It was close to 5:30 when I pulled into my parents' place. I got out of the car and walked towards the front door. Before I got there, my mother was already there to meet me. Neither one of us spoke, we just held each other, sharing a tender moment. I learned that Connie was at the airport to pick up her husband who was flying in. He wanted to lay out his plans with me for buying John shares. My father had been smart when he had set it up because we could not sell our shares without the other two shareholders' approval of it. Mom and I got to have a good chat before my cell phone went off. It was my wife's father. "Hi, Dad," I said. "What's up? Have you heard the rumors that have been going on about your brother in the work yards around this part of the state?" he asked. "Let me step into a different room, Dad, before I answer that," I said as I left the room my mother and I had been in. "Okay, now I can talk, and yes, I have," I said. "But to be honest, I've never seen anything that would lead me to believe any of them." "Why?" "He's got lots of illegal spicy videos on a computer in his office at home," Dad said. "Bijou and Bree discovered it last night and called us. They are rightfully afraid to be in the same room with him. We picked them up at school and I don't know what to do. Call Jo and tell her what the children told you and say you're giving the kids sanctuary until it can be verified that they are not in danger of being exposed to someone who may be a creep. At no time do you reveal your name and do not use your own phone. Go buy one of those throwaways for $20. So, no school for a few days and we got to keep them hidden," he said. "But why would I call Joanne?" "She works for me and her husband is a cop," I said. "Her husband will be the first one she calls, then it will be me, and Dad, thanks. I owe you one big time for stepping up for my daughters. Text me her number to their grandmother's phone and I will go get it done," he said. "I'll let you talk to your daughters." I was still talking to them half an hour later when my mother came in and said the police were here and wanted to talk to me. I told my girls I had to go. I hung up and texted the number to my mother-in-law's cell phone. Before going into the other room, I cleaned out all my text messages. "David, it's good to see you," I said. "What can I do for you?" "I came here to see if your mother knew where you were. Your daughters are missing, and your phone was busy every time I called," he said. "Beth has logged an official complaint accusing you of kidnapping your own daughters." I looked over at my mother, whose face showed great concern. "Well, David, I am happy to clear it up. What time did my daughters disappear?" I asked. "Right after closing bell at 2:30 this afternoon," David revealed. I reached into my wallet and handed him the state trooper's card and said, "Give him a phone call right now. I think it would be best that you learn for yourself how I know him." I watched as David called him. My mother came over beside me. I wrapped my arm around her lovingly. She knew I wasn't concerned. She heard David's side of the conversation and saw the huge smile come over his face as he ended the call. "I should have known," David said. "You have the perfect alibi. At the time of their disappearance, you were sharing a cold Coke talking about your problems an hour away with one of our fellow boys of blue." Just then, David got 5 text message notifications in a row. So he took a look at his cell phone and said, "Excuse me for a moment, I have to call someone. Be right back." David stepped outside and returned a few minutes later and asked to speak to me in private. We went into the room I had just came out of, and I closed the door, ensuring our privacy. "What do you know about the yard rumors about your older brother?" he asked. "Most of the men he worked with say that my brother likes them younger than they should be," I said. "Growing up, from the time I started dating, I kept my girlfriends as far as I could from him because even though I had never seen anything, I had my suspicions, so I played it safe." "Why?" "It seems your daughters discovered something they shouldn't on your brother's home computer that scared them," he said. "They told someone at school, and they have been granted sanctuary until we investigate it fully." I sat down and placed my head into my hands and said, "When I first reconnected with Beth when she was 17, she was running with a wild crowd. I had gone to pick up my brother that night because he was drunk. She asked me for a ride home. I wonder now if John had been her date that night." "That would explain a lot of things, wouldn't it?" David said. "I wish there was some way you could prove it." David walked over to where I sat and whispered, "Tell whoever is protecting your daughters we won't be charging them, but I will need a few days to resolve this. Your mistake was giving them my wife's number. My wife learned they had called you an hour ago and asked you what they should do." "It's Beth's parents. I had no clue," I said. "But I did tell them to buy a disposable phone to call your wife." David laughed and said, "Be thankful for having in-laws that care so much. I'll be seeing a judge in the morning for a search warrant on your brother's computer. Let him know that I might need your daughters to tell the judge what they saw." We walked back into the living room, and then I escorted the 2 officers to the front door. Just as I opened the door, Beth stepped in. "Are you arresting James for kidnapping, officer?" she asked. "Not at this time," David said. "Your soon-to-be ex has an unbreakable alibi. He was sitting with a police officer talking about you when your kids disappeared." Beth's face went white. She had been so sure that they were going to be with me. "I guess maybe the girls have run away because they don't want to live with you, Beth," I said. "David, do you think I should go home in case they show up?" "I think that's the smartest idea I have heard all day. After all, they are old enough to decide with whom they want to live with," David said with a big grin. "The only thing keeping you away from your children is their mother anyway. Just give me a call if they show up." I watched the police officer drive away before I turned to Beth and said, "The night I gave you a ride home when I was picking my brother up because he was drunk, was he your date?" The look on Beth's face revealed it all, so I added, "I guess I now know how long you've been screwing him behind my back, don't I?" My mother in rage yelled, "James, throw the bitch out of my house right now and let her know that if I ever see the bitch again, I will use one of my dead husband's rifles and put a bullet between her eyes myself." I looked at Beth and said, "I would run if I were you. She just might change her mind and kill you right now." I've never seen Beth so scared in my life. I think it took her 10 seconds to reach her car. I could not help it, but I broke out in laughter as she drove off in a hurry. "Well played, Mom," I said. "She actually believes it." "She better, because I meant it," she replied. I opened up my cell phone and called Beth's father. "Dad, can you bring Mom and the kids to my mother's for supper?" "Are you serious?" he asked. "We're going to celebrate the return of my daughters to the family," I said. "There will be no future problems with Beth or the police." "We're on our way," he said. "Mom, the girls will need to stay here until I can purchase furniture. Is that okay?" I asked. "Why don't you all move here until at least the whole divorce is done?" Mom said. "That way you can be free of the reminders of the damage that Beth has done to you all. I can drop them off and pick them up from school. But tomorrow, I'm taking them shopping for new clothes." "Sounds like a deal to me," I said as Elle leaned in and gave her a hug. "Make sure you get them new cell phones." Beth took theirs away when she moved them into John's place, so they couldn't contact me. Mom went into the kitchen to inform the cooking staff that there would be 4 more joining us for dinner at 8. I went out and got my suitcases out of the car and brought in the suits I had hanging. Mom told which bedroom would be mine, so I took my belonging up to that room. Beth was not a happy person. She was worried sick about her daughters. She was sure it had been James that had taken him. She had been rudely proven wrong, and her true relationship with John had been now fully exposed. It had been John that had taken her virginity before James, and she had reconnected. John had left them alone once they had started to reconnect. It wasn't until after the birth of her second daughter that John decided he had to reclaim what he had always thought was his. She had resisted his attempts for a sexual relationship for a long time. It had been a Wednesday afternoon with both the girls in grade school that he showed up at their house just after lunch. James was out of town on a business trip. She had let him in. He took her in his arms, and before she had a chance to understand, he kissed her, and soon she was burning in desire. It was a turn-on for her. He quickly turned her around and started having sex with her. We both know that when you have tasted paradise, you can never truly be happy until you have found it again. This afternoon has reinforced the fact that once again that we have discovered it. John said loudly to the empty walls, "To the seeing and the unseeing, let it be known that I am claiming this goddess as my woman, my wife." And her body response is showing her willing agreement. She had willingly allowed him to take her 3 times that afternoon. He indeed had taken her to heaven and back. It wasn't making love, it was animalistic sex in a raw, demanding, and forceful way. They were nothing but animals doing the most natural thing in the world. Each firm drive by him into her was his way of claiming that she was his, and he would do to her whatever he wished. After ravaging her body and mind for the 3rd time, he leaned down on her and whispered, "Beth," John had said, "I have always loved you and always will. I don't feel complete as a man unless I am connected with you, feeding you what we both know you need. You may feel that I own you, but rest assured I am branded by your tight whole muscles just as much." After she had gotten her daughters in bed for the night and had made sure they were asleep, she walked into the master bedroom to find John laying on her bed totally naked. She surrendered herself to him willingly and rode him for as long as she could as their eyes remained locked on each other. When fully exhausted, they had fallen asleep with her arms holding his head. Thursday, after she saw the girls off to school, they had screwed each other like rabbits for most of the day. That afternoon, John had worshipped her body for more than an hour. Friday that same week, he had come back and taken her over and over again, each time reinforcing the fact in her mind that inside of her was where his meat belonged. By the time they were done on that Friday, she had freely admitted she was owned by him. Before they had finished that Friday afternoon, she, to show her submissiveness to him by giving him a BJ once they were done. She was still savoring his taste when James came home and gave her a deep French kiss. If she hadn't had her tubes tied after the birth of her second, she still believed to this day that she would have been knocked up by him that first week. About 6 months ago, after having almost being caught by her oldest daughter, John had decided that it was the time that the two of them admitted their emotional bond publicly by moving in together. They had been so sure that James, the quiet one, would accept their relationship, and after a few rocky months, things would settle down. Boy, had they been wrong. He had been the exact opposite. He had caused a storm no one had seen coming by resigning the way he did. Now he was questioning the paternity of his daughters. John had come home this afternoon to inform her that he had been pushed out of his own company by the new CEO, his own sister. Then he had left to go talk to a corporate lawyer to see what he could legally do about it. It had been the real estate broker that James had listed their home with that forced both John and her to realize what they had done unintentionally to James. They had destroyed his life and made everything he had believed a lie. Now they were facing the consequences of their own conduct and the hate it was creating. They had never seen that they had branded him a cuck. Hell, they didn't even know what it meant until they looked it up. Society's view implied that most cucks were not in the eyes of the world a real man, but someone who was designed to be submissive to another as if they were owned. For James, it had to the ultimate insult, for that they would never be forgiven. Now even her parents were refusing to answer her calls. She had called them 5 times to find out if they had heard anything about their granddaughters. Even her text messages were not being responded to. She was wondering just what they knew. Beth knew she had to find a way to bridge the wide divide between her and James. They needed to start talking it all out. She picked up the phone and called him to find out if he had heard anything about their daughters. He answered on the 3rd ring. "James, have you heard anything about the kids?" she asked. "No, I haven't," he said, "but I don't think you need to worry." "Why do you feel that way?" she asked. "Because if they are as lucky as you, they will be picked up by a man like John," he said, "who will train them both to be eager and willing women like John did to you." Beth ended the call and sat there in her car crying her eyes out. James had just pointed out cruelly just how most probably saw John's and her relationship. James had made it quite clear before that was his greatest fear, that his daughters were going to become nothing but easy bitches. That's why he had said what he did. Because John, until he had got reconnected with her, was known to always have a woman on his arms. In James' eyes, John had just moved the biggest one ever into his home. She felt ashamed. She felt used and owned in a way she never had experienced before. It was then she realized how different the two men she had loved were. One wanted her to be a better person in a life filled with quality and love. The other, the image of the first, but a woman who dressed and acted with class, but was a sexy woman and be acceptable to doing everything. To become what John wanted in a relationship, she had sold the morals and principles that she had grown up with, and everybody now knew it. She had turned her wild child youth into her walk-in life. It was a celebration at my mother's place as my teenage daughters could not keep themselves from me. Beth's parents and I didn't say a word, but we all hugged each other a lot. For all of us, it had been a very trying 4 days. The girls were delighted to see Aunt Connie and Uncle Tom. During the meal, we told the girls about our temporary plans until the divorce was done. They were both delighted about it. With what was going on, we decided to leave the business matters until tomorrow. Beth's father and I were taking a walk outside on the property so we could talk in private. "James, how long is my daughter and your brother's relationship being going on?" he asked. "From what I just learned, I can say off and on since the first time I brought her home from the wild party my brother was attending." Beth admitted that John had been her date that night. My father-in-law's eyes teared up, and he replied with a broken voice, "Then why did Beth start chasing you?" "I have to believe that John and Beth were not serious about each other back then," I said. "That night saw me in a different light. The first few years of married life were good. I think John started desiring what I had and started chasing her." "John was always the more aggressive one between the two of you," Beth's dad observed. "It made him mad that you were doing so well in your personal life. Your father told me a long time ago that John felt he was always trying to live up to you because your standards and approach to things was so high." "I never knew that," I said. "It's sad that John had to pull Beth down with him in the fall he has created for himself. The police will be seizing his computer sometime this week. If he has what we believe he has on it, Beth will end up getting what she desired to give me, supervised visitation of her daughters. After what she has done," Beth's dad said, "she deserves it. Some have to learn the hard way. You reap what you sow." I was late getting to the office Tuesday morning because I was being selfish. I was enjoying being reconnected with my beautiful daughters. My mother was glowing with excitement because it had been a long time since she had a girls' day out with her granddaughters. When I walked through the doors to our main office location, the employees were lined up and clapping. Carl Robertson was at the end of the line with Mary and Joanne with him. All three shook my hand. I told Carl that as soon as the president's office was redone and set up that we would redo the vice president's office according to his wishes. That morning, in the business section of the daily newspaper, the announcement came out about me being appointed as president and the promotion of Carl as a vice president since John Tate was no longer with the organization. That's when the phone started ringing. Both Carl and I were swamped with new business opportunities that were coming in. Joanne and Mary learned that most were because of the fact that John was no longer associated with the company. It seems that he was not well liked generally. It made me wonder just how much business he had cost the firm over the years. I left the office that day and went to pick up the rest of my clothes from my former home. I had called Mom and knew they were still out shopping. I had been there half an hour and was loading up the trunk of the car when I got attacked from behind. Big Brother had shown up. The last time we had fought, he had beat me badly. I grabbed the tire iron and swung down to the side of his leg. With that blow hitting him, he released me. I guess a neighbor had seen it and called the cops, who came to break us up. By that time, neither one of us in the greatest of the condition, but at least I was still standing. The cops could tell that John had been drinking. Being the aggressor, they put him under arrest. I collapsed and woke up in the hospital. I learned I had cracked ribs that had popped out, but they thought given a couple of days rest they would resettle back in place. A lot of internal bleeding. My body was black and blue with bruises, so was my face. My mother said I looked like the diseased characters from the movie Soylent Green. John was going to be charged with aggravated assault. My daughters were upset emotionally because of how I looked and what happened. Bijou and Bree, what happened to me resulted because your mother and your uncle have been acting out their emotions because they can't control them. People being led like that lose the ability to see things logically, I said. It causes them, in the long run, to make their situation worse. I will recover, but with the long-term damage they are doing to themselves, they may not. The girls and my mother stayed with me until I drifted off to sleep. Connie, Mom, and Tom came into the hospital room I was placed in the next morning. In order to get the loan Tom wanted, we were required to agree to expand into the northern part of the state. It seems one of our competitors north of us was in financial trouble and unable to find the funds they required. As a result, they had just filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. The company was being liquidated because debts way exceeded the value of all assets. He was suggesting we step in and offer to complete all their existing contracts and make a lowball offer on all their existing equipment and buildings. I said, why don't we just buy controlling interests in their shares? Tom explained that their debt load was just too great, and then we would be stuck with their union contracts, which were loaded with high pensions and medical commitments, which would end up putting us in the same boat. Mom then shocked the three of us completely when she said, James has been the de facto president of the company for years. We all know that. When Jacob was alive, it was James who was carrying the load, and he knew it. Even though James talked to him daily to keep him informed and to get his approval, it was James who was running the show. Tom, I want to give James the 27% of the shares needed to give him complete control because we can't guarantee that John will agree to sell. The rest I am giving to Connie. We all know that I have enough, thanks to James' wisdom in handing my investments, to live on comfortably for the rest of my life, she said. Does anyone have any problem with that? I do, I said. If we are going to go that big, I will only agree to all of this if Tom finally comes aboard as our chief financial officer. I know it might be a dent in his pay, but that's the sacrifice he will just have to accept. Connie got tears in her eyes because our father had never truly accepted Tom as part of the family. There was just something in Tom's personality that had stuck in my father's craw. Just the offer by me to Tom meant everything to her. Hell, I added. I will even throw in the cost of your move and pay for the house you will have to buy if you say yes. Tom was flabbergasted. He didn't know what to say. The firm he worked for was always advising and wheeling and dealing with putting things together for someone else. Sure, he made good money, but he knew that James would pay him just as much as John had made, and that was a hell of a lot more. Connie looked at her husband and said, just don't stand there, say something. Tom walked up to the side of the bed and offered me his hand. I accepted it, and as we shook, he said, I'd be honored to come aboard. Mom was ecstatic her only daughter was moving home. After they left, I called Carl and informed him what the plans were going forward. I learned that the company assets and contracts we were going after had been supported by some in the state capital. Carl believed that there were a lot of paybacks being done by them under the table. I made it clear that if the court accepted our offer, the name changes and all things related to it had to be done quickly. They released me on Friday. My mother was there to pick me up and drive me to my house so I could finish packing and get the car. Connie would be flying in to begin looking for a house in the morning. My body had started to heal. My divorce lawyer, having heard about the beating I had taken, had gotten a restraining order served on both Beth and John. The in-laws had been up to visit 3 times. It's been a quiet 3 days, Mom said. I'm glad because it's given the girls time to adjust. It's been a long time since I had to explain the difference between the choices people make and the consequences that go with it. How are my daughters emotionally? I asked. They're handling it better than I would have, she said. Yet they will both need some private quality time with you alone. Then they shall have the whole weekend with me if that's what it takes, I said. Before I come back to the house, I'm going to stop and pick up the material from the motor vehicle office so Bree can start studying for her learners. Tom has given his notice and has completed the valuation of the company, Mom said. Connie will be bringing the report and his firm's bill. They offered him a huge raise in an attempt to keep him, but he turned it down flat, saying his sign-on bonus was a brand new house. Mom, Tom has the knowledge we need to put this big growth together smoothly, I said. Besides, bringing him into the family business was long overdue. If you felt that way, why wasn't it done before? Mom asked. I couldn't do it. The president wouldn't approve it, I said. We finally arrived at my house. I got out of the car and thanked her and headed in. After opening the front door, I grabbed the mail. In the pile of mostly junk was a letter from Beth. After reading it, I threw in the garbage. It was too little too late, and I did not believe any of it. How can anyone be sorry for what they did deliberately? I called a cleaning service and arranged for them to come and remove all the food, clean the place and shut the water and all equipment off. I gave them the access code to shut off the alarm and said I would drop off a key in about 2 hours. It took me about an hour to finish packing all my clothes and personal stuff. Before leaving, I decided to shave some parts of my face. It was time for a new look, so Elle left the growth for a nice mustache and a goatee. David called me to inform me they had just raided John's place and seized his computer. John's lawyer was in negotiations and trying to get the charges reduced for a guilty plea. My daughters were already back from school at Mom's when I got there. Both of them helped me move the rest of my clothing in and put it away. Afterward, the three of us just laid on the queen-size bed and cuddled while we had a very long chat. One of the things that came up was the act of having sex. I said, when you have sex for sex purposes, it is basically to satisfy your own animalistic needs. In making love, you are putting the needs and satisfaction of the other first. In doing that, you are strengthening the physical and emotional bond with your significant other. What drew Uncle John and Mom together? Bijou asked. Was it love or just the sexual attraction they had for each other? Your uncle desired what I had, I said. Instead of quenching it, he allowed it to build until it forced him to act on it. Your mother may have been overpowered by him at first, but found herself attracted by the animal nature of it. After that first raw session together, each time they saw each other, the remembrance of that day drew them towards each other. Over time, that desire forced them into a long-term relationship which required them to lie and deceive everyone around them. I was worried that I might have made it sound complicated, but I was surprised, for Bree said, basically they each bought what the other was advertising instead of having enough morals to walk away. What do you mean by that? Said Bijou. My red dress that you desire so much, Bree said. I keep taunting you with it because I know you want it. That's what Mom and Uncle John did. Instead of the red dress, they used their physical appearance to taunt each other. Bree then got up and left the room. When she came back, she had the red dress that Bijou wanted. Handing it to her sister, she said, what I did was just as wrong as what they did, but to a different degree. I'm sorry, sis, the dress is yours. With that, I got off the bed and opened up the top drawer in the dresser and grabbed the booklet and said as I tossed it to Bree, you best start studying that because you can get your learners in 3 months. Bree squealed in delight. Thank you, Daddy. My girls were growing up. Both had learned a very important concept of life, and I was very proud of them. Mom had asked the kids what they wanted for supper, and they had said mac and cheese. It was a hoot when we got served the old-fashioned type that had been baked in the oven, along with a very nice pork chop and baked beans. After supper, knowing that I was still weak and still in recovery, I called it a night and went to bed early. It was around midnight that Bijou crawled in beside me. As I pulled her into me to cuddle her, I couldn't help thinking that Beth would have used something as innocent as this as proof of child molestation. Connie came home bearing an exciting gift for me, which was greatly appreciated. In his evenings at home, he had completed the proposal for the bankruptcy court, and all it needed was my signature for it be sent in. If it was approved, we would gain 123 new locations and would double our size. Carl and I reviewed it on Monday morning and discussed the pros and cons of it. After signing it, I had Joanne scan it in for our records. She sent it out to the state capitol where the bankruptcy judge who was handling it was located by same-day courier. As soon as it was picked up, she came in to inform of me of that fact. As she was heading back out, I said, Joe and I informed payroll that you're now on a salary of $70,000 a year effective the current pay period. I told them your position is now considered junior management. It was a real pleasure to see Joanne's eyes tear up in pure joy. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Joanne came into my office and closed the door. James, we need to talk privately for a few, she said. David wanted to let you know what's going on, so is using me as the messenger. I stopped what I was doing and got up and walked around to the front of the desk. After moving one of the chairs, I sat down right across from her. You got my undivided attention, I said. The images that we found on your brother's computer are of all girls who were not of legal age, Joanne explained. All of them are local girls. David is looking for them to find out what their story is. David feels it might be a trophy list of all the girls whose virginity he has taken over the years because Beth's picture was one of them. He wants to see if John had the same pattern of behavior with them all. I'm not surprised, I said. A few of the workers when I was growing up had said that John had pictures of some of his conquests. Beth at 17 would mean that John would have been 23, so it could legally be considered as statutory assault. It does point out a pattern of behavior that David feels can be used as an advantage in your divorce, Joanne disclosed. It would mean that you would have to attack his motives directly by implying that the only reason he wanted Beth to move in was so it could give him easy access to your daughters. With what we are learning about John since his removal from the company, I said, I will have no problem doing that. The problem is how to do it. David will have to write up an official internal report, Joanne explained. It will be up to the district attorney to decide what he is going to do with the information. David will bring a copy of it on a disc home, which I will get to you. Sounds good to me, and tell David I owe him one, I said. When I called David to inform him about what you had done, he was overwhelmed by your generosity. We both know that was one hell of a raise. Mary has been rewarded too, I said. Just not as much as you. As Carl's assistant, she is now junior management too. Connie's husband is coming aboard as our first chief financial officers. I want Mary and you to find the most qualified assistant, one within our current staff that the two of you feel could fit in the best with you too. When you have picked her, the three of us will sit down with her and explain what her new responsibilities will include, if she agrees to become part of the management team. We will use the empty offices where we have John's former furniture stored. We will use it for them. You're really changing things for the better, she said. Why? We very shortly might be doubling our size and going statewide. There are going to be days when the upper management will be tied up or out of the office. I explained. As our executive assistants, you three will be, once you are fully set up and fully trained, be making decisions on our behalf. So, we better make sure that Mary and I can trust the one that we pick, she said. Like you trust us. Any problems regarding Mary and the new girl is part of your new responsibility. It will be you they deal with, I said. If you can't solve it, remember you can always ask me for my advice. Joanne walked out of the office with the proudest look I had ever seen. When I left for the day, Mary and Joanne were in a deep discussion. As Carl and I walked out together, Carl told me the new structure going forward was brilliant. Mary and I are starting to put plans together in case our offer is accepted, Carl said. Human Resources are going to compile a list of who should be considered for relocation and promotion for the new openings being created. Good thing I added a 30-day notice before acceptance to give us a chance to prepare, I said. Connie's husband Tom is coming aboard as our CFO. Without his arranging the financing, there is no way we could have considered doing this. John will be getting contacted about the buying out of his shares later this week. Anything happening on the divorce end? Carl asked. We have a court hearing this week about getting an order for the blood tests, I said. We were the last one called before the judge that Friday. I was surprised to learn Judge Donald McDonald was not a huge man. By his reputation, I had assumed that he was tall and broad, but in reality, he was about 5'10", about 180 pounds. He had a very little neck with broad shoulders. He appeared to be in his late 50s. My lawyer laid out the basic relationship of the three of us, explaining how Beth and I had reconnected. She went through how I had discovered who she had fallen in love with, in denial of it by my brother when I had confronted him. She then produced an affidavit from my mother disclosing that Beth had told her that it had been going on for 2 years. She then played the cam recording from David. Judge McDonald took a real interest in it. Finally, I got called up to explain what I learned the day Beth had accused me of kidnapping my own children. I could see the judge's face getting very concerned. When I told him what Beth's response was when I confronted her about the day, we reconnected. His face turned a different color. For a moment, he looked really old. Beth's lawyer tried to explain it all away and gave an honest attempt to contradict our presentation. Finally, the judge spoke. It's apparent that there is enough circumstantial evidence that implies that there has been an off and on again sexual relationship between Beth and John Tate longer than there was a marriage between Beth and James Tate. That implies that the one brother might have been trying to pass on his parentage upon the other. That makes it clear that there is a 50-50 chance that either one could be the father. The only way we are going to know the true parentage of the children, because it is human nature that our memories change over time, is to have a DNA comparison of both possible fathers with the children concerned, the judge continued. The things that weigh the most in making this ruling is the video of John Tate's disclosures to the cop and his response. When all issues are resolved, the divorce will be granted to James Tate on the grounds of adultery. Beth was devastated. John looked at me in pure rage. The judge, although not saying it, was implying that they had been manipulating me all my life. I had a big grin filled with a lot of satisfaction on my face. As we were getting to leave, we all noticed Beth's parents and her older brother standing there preparing to leave the courtroom. I could see the pain and sorrow in their eyes. They had been there for the whole hearing. I guess her parents had some hope that we were all wrong in our thinking. Beth started to walk towards them. They turned their backs to her and walked out the door. We all understood the message they had just given to Beth because of their religious views. From this day forward, she would be shunned. In today's society, she was the walking dead. I walked over to Beth with my lawyer beside me. Beth, you must be extremely proud. Not many can say they have destroyed 2 families in less than a month, I said. I'm sure you will be pleased to know that both Bijou and Bree are doing well. My lawyer and I continue on our way out as Beth began to bawl. We got outside and Beth's family was waiting for me. Mom, Dad, do you want the girls for the weekend? I asked. It would give them a chance to spend time with their favorite uncle. Mom teared up and hugged me and said, we'd love to. Ted, Beth's brother, held out his hand and said, it's good to see you, old friend. If my daughters don't tire you out tomorrow, I said as I shook his hand. How about we go out for a late supper and a few beers afterward? I'm coming home for good, James, he said. I'm getting too old to keep up with the young. 20 years is long enough. So, I'm home with the family for a couple of weeks to house hunt and find a job. Just then my cell phone rang. It was Joanne. So I answered it saying, "What's up?" "We just got word the 30-day countdown is on," Joan said with excitement. "Thanks, and let Carl know that I have just found the head for our resource department," I said. "That is if I can convince him to come with us." "How did it go in divorce court?" Joan asked. "I will explain when I get back to the office," I said. "Bye." Ted, $60,000 a year to start until you prove yourself, and a review after the first 6 months as the head of Parish's new resource department, I said. "Do you want it?" "What does it entail?" Ted asked. "Management of purchasing and distribution and control of inventory to 3 hubs for distribution to our retail stores and commercial sites that we are working on. Most residential jobs are done through our retail outlets, and our contracted bid supplies will be delivered on-site from one of the hubs," I explained. "Damn it, you're serious," he said. "Of course, I will take it." "James," Beth's dad said, "take him to see your house if he is interested. I will cover his down payment." So that's what we did. Since he had been overseas, most of what he had over there with his family would be sold off before moving back. They would be starting over with basically nothing. After looking at the house with his wife and finding out what went with it, they decided to go write up an offer at full price. I went with them and accepted their offer. All that was needed was Beth to sign off on it. Ted could not get over how easy it was going to be for them to start over. I stopped at a wine shop and picked up 2 bottles of wine and a block of cheese with a cracker plate before heading back to the office. The 4 in the upper management team had a little celebration before calling it a night. My girls had to call me to ask me if it was okay if they went with their grandparents for the weekend. I acted surprised, but I said, "Go ahead and have fun." When I got back to my mother's, I told her what I had done after court this afternoon. She said, "Ted is getting a good deal. The items you are selling in that house is worth more than what they are paying for it. Believe me, they know you are setting them up better than they could have dreamed." "Ted's family, no matter what Beth did," I said. "He will pay me back big time by watching every penny like a hawk." "Once again you take the high road," Mom said. "Your father would be proud just as I am." "Thank you, Mom. It means a lot, especially because I'm still hurting," I said, "because I still love her." "Oh, that reminds me. John sold the shares back to me this morning," Mom said, "for $5 million through my personal lawyer, so I guess I'm staying in as part of the board." "What motivated him to do that?" I asked. "He told my lawyer he had never been happy in the industry. He stayed because it was owned by the family," Mom explained. "As soon as the divorce is over, they will be moving to Florida because he is going into property development as he has a lot of lands down there. He is going to develop." I was smiling because John would never know that our business was worth over $40 million based on current market value, according to Tom's report. Using that report, we had secured $15 million, which we had spent $10 million on buying on the assets and contracts in the north for 10 cents on the dollar. Tom, in reviewing their assets, felt we could recoup close to $7 million after streamlining the operation by getting rid of their head office building, the 4 unneeded storage centers no longer needed, and the excess of vehicles on hand. It would cost a couple of million for repainting the commercial fleet and rebranding. Using the retail outlet as we did down here would allow us to use local independent contractors. The incentives that kept them working for us was based on their production and quality of service they provided for our customers. On Christmas Eve, all independent contractors got a Christmas bonus equaling 10% of the revenue they generated tax-free. We had learned years ago that by doing it that way our service to the customer improved, complaints about workers dogging it shrunk, and customer satisfaction went way up. Mom dragged me out with her to one of the social events that were must-attend situations on Saturday afternoon. I thought it was going to be one hell of a boring afternoon. It was a community fundraiser for a family who was raising money to cover the copay of the huge medical bill caused by their daughter's cancer treatment. It was there that I was introduced to Dr. Tamara Braden, their doctor. I wasn't looking, but she sure caught my eye. I called our accountant and asked for his approval to donate the $50,000 needed to cover the debt since the girl's current treatments were over and she was cured. It took him an hour to write out the check, take it to hospital billings, and have it directly applied to their bill. Tamara and I were both going through divorces, so we had something to relate to. We found that both of us were cheated on. She had not had any children yet, but didn't seem surprised when I said mine were teenagers. I was just turning 40, she wouldn't say, but I figured she was around 32. When he brought me the receipt which showed the bill paid in full, I took it and went to the center of the room. After getting everyone's attention, I said, "To the Johnston family, I would like to present them with this receipt that says paid in full. Parish Electrical heard of your plight and has paid the copay in full on your behalf. The organization prays that it never comes back again." Tamara came over to me and whispered, "I'm so impressed, I'm taking you home for dinner." I laughed and said, "Then you will have to drive me home afterward because I came here with my mother and she's my ride home." She laughed and said, "You can't be serious." That my mother right over there, I said as I pointed her out. The one bursting in pride. Oh, you mean Ruth? She one of our greatest contributors, Tamara said. She always helps those she can. But you didn't know that her maiden name was Parrish, I said. Our company was named after her. Tamara smiled and said, what was wrong with the woman who is divorcing you? She got involved with a man who really has no morals, I said. Sad because they're both going down because of it. Tamara, we made it. Sorry we were so late, Ted's wife said as she walked towards us. I got great news. If you want me to start early, I can. I'm not going back with Ted. The kids and I are staying here. James, what are you doing here? Jackie, I was just talking to Tamara, I said. My mother's just over there watching me like a hawk. How do you know James? Tamara asked Jackie. He's divorcing my sister-in-law, she said. And he's going to be Ted's new boss, and he gave us a hell of a deal on his old house. Why? Tamara asked. No matter what Ted's sister did, I said. Ted is always will be family. If you need any furniture, Tamara said, I have some you can have. The only thing that didn't come with the house was furniture for the kids' bedrooms, Jackie said. Ted's parents bought that this morning for us after the sale was confirmed when Beth signed the agreement. Ted and I let the ladies talk and walked off. Beth and I talked for a few. She's hurting big time. She's suffering from depression, he said. I told her that she did it to herself, but everyone else is hurting too. Even your daughters, because nobody can understand why you did it. Not even you. Ted, she doesn't know it's going to get worse for her before it starts to get better, I said, because of John's past conduct that is going to become very public. A little advice, take it easy with Tamara. She a beautiful woman who is hurting as much as you, Ted said. She is and has always been a keeper. Tamara came and took my hand and said, let's go. I promised you dinner, and we're going to have to go shopping to pick up a few things. Mom watched us head out. Tamara handed me the keys and asked me to drive her over to Food City, a small independent grocery store that was known for having the best selection for meat in the area. She offered to allow me to wait, but I said no, so we went in together. What's on the menu? I asked. Steak cooked on a grill, a tossed salad, and if you have room, dessert, Tamara said. If that's okay? Sounds good, I replied. We best pick up a couple of bottles of red wine to go with it, I said. It was after midnight before I got back home. Tamara and I had a wonderful evening together. We had agreed to get together the following Saturday. For some reason, I had the best night's sleep since Beth walked out of our marriage. Mom dragged me to church on Sunday. Connie had finally found and put in an offer on the house she wanted. I told her to submit a copy of the purchase agreement to accounting if it was agreed to so they could issue the check. The girls met their mother at the mall for lunch. They told me afterward that it did not go well. First, they had revealed that I had met someone, and they hoped the lady would help me to start healing. My mother had called them and informed them about my first date. They then had told her what they had found on John's computer. That was the first time that Beth had heard about it. Beth was devastated because she knew that her getting sole custody of our daughters had been lost. The girls believed their mother was going through a depression. While that was happening, the district attorney had just finished laying multiple charges of statutory assault against my brother. He apparently had told all the parents of John's previous victims that John had just moved a woman into his house who had 2 minor daughters that suited his taste. Most of them had agreed to lay charges to protect those innocent girls from him. They arrested him the next day at his home in front of Beth. The moment they took him into custody, Beth realized that she would never be allowed custody of her children. What her divorce lawyer had written up in the original divorce petition was coming true. Not for James but for her, because she had allowed herself to be taken down by someone who was the complete opposite of James. It had been just over 2 months since Tamara and I had met. John was out on bail. Beth and my divorce lawyers had worked out all monetary details. She would get $4 million and that was it. She would not get any of my shares. The DNA test had confirmed that Bijou and Bree were my biological daughters. Even Beth seemed relieved. We had agreed that I would get sole custody, but Beth would be allowed liberal visitation and access as long as it was not in John's presence. Beth had fought us on it during meditation, but I pointed out that I would raise the thought that the only reason John wanted her to move in was so that he could have liberal access to my daughters. Hearing that had broken Beth, because she had to face the fact that what I threatened to claim may be fact. The amount of money I was giving her, if invested properly, would allow Beth some quality of life if John did indeed have to do time. I provided her with the name of 2 investment advisors that she should work with when the divorce was finalized. Connie and Tom had moved back with their brood of 5, much to my mother's delight. She was getting to know Connie's children intimately, and for her, that was truly a blessing. Mom said her life had been filled with more love than what she had lost. I could see the truth in that comment. My mother, my sister, and I decided that Connie would remain CEO, much to Tom's delight. John's reputation had been totally destroyed. Even those he had called lifelong friends had turned against him. His legal bills were mounting. My daughters believed that as soon as their mothers and my divorce was final, their mother would dump him. The cost of having a real relationship with him to her had ended up being too great. They were concerned with their mother's depressed state. The takeover was moving ahead quite well. The contracts that had fallen behind because of the bankruptcy had been caught up to date and were now ahead of schedule. Most would end up coming in way under the agreed price. We had decided to rebate them all 10% after the final payment had been received. We had cut the projected cost of labor and their related costs by 50% since taking them over. I had flown out to see some of the changes being made and some of the new buildings and land we became owners of. The excess had been put up for sale at their appraised value. Human resources, working with the former employees, had worked out so that more than half of them had become contractors working out of our new retail locations. We had given them interest-free loans to buy the trucks and equipment that they needed from us at wholesale prices. Part of the package set up with them was the accounting program from Quicken Books. Ted, in his first major purchase because of the increase of volume we needed, and his skillful negotiations, had cut the cost per item by 20%. He had started reorganizing our whole approach, which would cut our handling costs greatly when fully completed. He was proving that I had made the right choice. Jackie and he were tickled pink with their new home. They were slowly making decoration changes to make it their own. The upper management team was thrilled because by the time it was completed, the allowances we had for write-offs and losses had been cut by 2/3. We had learned that those at the Capitol had wanted the bankruptcy handled as quickly and quietly as possible, giving credibility to our thoughts that there had been major paybacks for some of those contracts. We had been the first and only offer. We all figured those in power had wanted to make sure certain things remained hidden. Tom had hired his old firm to do a new appraised value because of our huge growth. Mom and I were preparing for a huge barbecue at Mom's place this Saturday. I was a bundle of nerves because most would be meeting tomorrow for the first time. The whole management team and their whole family were coming. All of Beth's and my family would be there too. I slipped away to pick up Tamara because I wanted her to meet my daughters before the rest of the crowd arrived. Even though it was a casual affair, Tamara had decided to wear a dress that accented her body in a complimentary manner. She truly looked stunning. With her red hair let down resting on her shoulder, wearing white with hand-stitched embroidery monarch butterflies going down the side, she was a knockout. Tamara was 5'8", weighted less than 120 pounds, but she was dynamite. We shared a few sensual kisses before heading out. We entered the backyard of my mother's together holding hands. Bijou and Bree came right over. Tamara must have felt my nervousness because she said, "Relax." After introductions, Bijou said to her, "If you're my dad's girlfriend, he sure picked a good one." I could see the change in Tamara right away. I leaned and whispered, "You were as nervous as I was." Tamara acknowledged that she was. The party turned out to be a great success. Between my two mothers, my sister and my daughters, they soon had Tamara fitting in as if she had been part of the group all along. Tamara ended up learning more about me than I was ready for her to know. When Ted and I were getting a cold beer, he said, "It looks like the two of you are starting to fall in love. Mom and Dad are going to babysit for us. So, how about we go to Bithia's on Bithia and go dancing?" "Sounds good to me," I said. David and I had a brief moment, and he told me the DA thought John was going down for at least 7 because of the severe number of parents who were standing up against him. "Joanne thinks that Tamara is the best thing that's come into your life for a long time, but is worried that you will screw it up," David said. I told her why women always think it's the man's fault. Mom had opened up the pool, so Tamara and I were sitting in the lounge chairs watching those who had decided to have a swim. I didn't like how much skin my daughter's bathing suits were showing. It must have been showing. Tamara said, "You really are just old-fashioned in your values. Was your father that way?" I thought about it for a few before saying, "Yeah, I guess he really was. He wanted us to be the best we could be and always stressed that how we walked, talked, and conducted ourselves said more about us than our own mouths could. Sadly, that is what drove Beth to do what she did. If my first husband was like you, we would have still been married," Tamara said. We looked at each other without saying a word before sharing a long, sensual kiss. I think we both realized that our relationship had become serious. Bree, sticking her head out of the water, said teasingly, "Cool it, Dad, she's not our new mother yet." Having broken the mood by my daughter, I took off my socks and shoes, made sure my keys and wallet were hidden in them, then ran into the pool to get her. Tamara watched as I played with my daughters for about an hour before I got out to go in to get changed. When I returned, the three of them were having a good chat. Both the girls then took multiple pictures with themselves. They made the mistake of sending a bunch to their mother, letting her know that it was serious. The food the staff had prepared was over the top. Tamara found it interesting that I went into the kitchen to thank them for how well they had done. It was noticed by all that we were never apart. We met Ted and Jackie at the Irish restaurant and bar. Tamara was the client of the owner's wife. We danced until closing. I really enjoyed myself. I walked Tamara to her front door and got invited in. Tamara and I stopped at the house so I could get changed and had gone out shopping before Mom and the girls got back from church. We were all expected at Mom's for Sunday night family dinner. Everyone was wondering where I was. In frustration, my daughter texted me, "Where are you? We're waiting." About 2 minutes later, Tamara and I walked in the door. Bijou said, "It's about time, dinner is about ready. You got some explaining to do, Dad, because you didn't come home last night." I couldn't help it. I broke out in a big grin. That got my sister and my mother's attention. I asked the staff to bring in 2 bottles of champagne and glasses for everybody. Tamara had her hands behind her back. My mother caught what was going on. A big smile came across her face. When we all had been served, I said, "Tamara and I got engaged this afternoon." That's when it became a madhouse at Mom's place. Tamara proudly showed everyone her huge diamond ring. Bree had recorded my announcement and sent a copy to her mom. That night, their mother took an overdose of sleeping pills and went to bed. In her depression, she couldn't deal with me getting on with my life. She never woke up. We would learn later that John and Beth were blaming each other for all the problems they were having in their lives. Both realized that what they had was not love, it was lust, and they had confused themselves because of that. Everybody took her suicide hard. John and I were standing by Beth's grave sharing a few words for the last time in our lives. He said, "I'm sorry for everything." I told him I didn't believe him because he could not be specific about what he was sorry about and walked away. That night, John took out his favorite possession, the first gun our father had bought him. After drinking 3/4 of a bottle of Jack, he placed the barrel below his chin and pulled the trigger. On the table beside, he had written 2 words, "I'm sorry." It was a week before the Labor Day weekend. I was sitting in my office reviewing a few things when Carl, Tom, Mary, Joanne, and Lucy came in carrying a huge cake, glasses, and champagne. I looked up and said, "What's the celebration for?" "We paid off the loan in full," Tom said. "For the huge expansion. We are again debt-free." "Thank God," I said. "I never want another 6 months like the last 6 ever again." "It wasn't all bad," Tom said. "I'm looking forward to becoming your best man in 8 days. But I never want to hear you say," I said, "that we had to get married." Everybody laughed because they all knew that tomorrow was 2 months along. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.